Okay, so today's show we have that toughness training versus human skills. All right, so this is like something that I want to preface what we're talking about now because now we're in a different kind of place. Like, Doug, you just did the PCISs, and we're constantly kind of moving around. And I can probably say this for both of us. The mental health or the wellness side of first responders right now is nothing like it was. It's leaps and bounds like ahead of where it was. So, I come at this topic of like the toughness training versus human skills, or just like emotional side, or like an emotional survival type of training, in generationally, or just in when they got hired. So when Doug and I got hired, there was nothing like this. There was nothing. I mean, there was no. It was all tactics. It was all what to do. I know for us, when we did training, like getting ready to go and to do the work, was don't show emotion, get your shit together, hold it in. If you deal with it later, whatever, just suck it up. That was 100% across the board. But now you got a lot of folks coming onto the job, that this is part of it. And I'm not knocking anybody that does it. To me, it's cringeworthy where there are videos online of people getting accepted into the academy, and then they get to meet the whole staff, and it's like a dance line, like coming into the academy. The day I got into the police academy, we sat down, and I had a Vietnam era veteran officer who was running our academy. Big shout out to Ray. He was a highly decorated SF, combat veteran. And one of our guys that was in our academy class parked somewhere, or a couple of us parked somewhere where we weren't supposed to, where the academy was. So we didn't get to dance in and shake everybody's hand and be like, hey, great to meet you. My guy came in and says, who are the fuck sticks that parked in the goddamn wrong, blah, 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 and just went fucking off. And he goes, and we're all in suits, right? Because we didn't get issued anything yet. It's like day one, minute one. And we're yelling at, and they're calling us pieces of shit. I can't believe you. What kind of fucking idiots would do? And they were using all sorts of language. It was, I was literally, while I was in the police academy, I was on terminal leave from the military. So I was like, okay, so he's yelling at us. Not a big deal. It was a shock for a couple of people that were in there. But so that's how we were like indoctrinated. I don't know if, Doug, when you got to the academy, did they bake you a cake and say thank you for coming here? No, they didn't. Again, it's changed since we came on, right?
My beginning in my police academy was exactly like yours. I got yelled at and screamed at and made fun of, and million push-ups and running, and we're dressed up in the name calling that clearly isn't accepted in this day and age.
No, and our guys, I mean, you'd get a rap on the beak. Like they put hands on you. There was no fucking around. So it was a different kind of academy. And I say that because I was working with guys that joined the police department first, worked the street, then went to the academy. Yeah. So like it changes over time. So when we talk about being prepared to do the job, emotionally or behaviorally, it's a little bit different. Like every 10, 20 years, it kind of shifts a little bit, right? So I'm going to talk to you guys, and we're both going to talk to you from what it looks like. We were trained to do what we needed to do. And when we got into specialty training, whether it was special tactics or preparing for doing search warrants or making, building entries or hostage rescue, so all these different things, the messing up during training resulted in a physical penalty. That's just the way it was. And it wasn't like, all right, guys, you messed up. Let's go ahead and do some push-ups, or let's go ahead and run a mile and a half, or let's go do it. It wasn't very nice. It was in your face. You were more, and I'll tell you right now, the majority of us we're more pissed off at ourselves for fucking it up than for being yelled at, if that makes any sense, right? So, because a lot of people, like and this goes back to the military. Like I left the military, and then I had some family members go in, and they had introduced stress cards. So if you're getting yelled at, you can hold the stress card up, and then they'll stop yelling at you and give you some me time or whatever it calls. My drill instructor, company commander, was a 5-time divorcee going through his 6th divorce, who was an alcoholic, and his sole existence was to work to provide funding for his 5 other wives and stuff like that. So he was not the nicest person in the world. So it wasn't. He wasn't one of those guys that would just be like, oh, hey, listen, guys, I know I'm having a bad day, and he would be in your face yelling at you. So kind of going right into the police side of it, it wasn't a big thing. Then we had, I want to say, an hour and a half, 4 months into the academy, a guy that had shot and killed a guy that was trying to attack him with a knife. A police officer came in to tell us about what it's like to kill somebody, or to be in that situation, like a deadly force situation. And it was like an hour and a half. And it was the craziest. Not taking anything away from it. I know the guy that did it and worked with him since then, and phenomenal guy. But he had died running at him, shot him once, and this bullet found its way to the perfect spot where it dropped this guy like a sack of hammers. So that was the only training I got. Now fast forward to my last shooting, I shot this guy for 15 minutes. This guy wasn't dying. I was like, so it did not prepare us for it. Now that's just the mechanics of it. That's just going kinetic and what it looks like to go kinetic. No one told me how it was going to feel like afterwards. Nobody told me what it was going to feel like after a year. A month on the job, we had a police officer killed. I was going to a funeral during my academy for a police officer that was killed in line of duty, which was, you see a lot of emotion from the civilian side of the house, and there was some emotion from some officers, and they were kind of looked at like, this is the job, this is what you do, kind of stuff like that. Nobody talked about that. Nobody talked about what it looks like to unload that stuff or come home. So as a result, 15, 20 years later, after all this stuff is going down, is it any wonder why we're in the position that we're in or what we're doing? And some of the older guys and girls that are on the job act the way they do. And we see it a lot, like being cynical and stuff like that. And kind of, but we're taught that. Don't feel, other than maybe having compassion for a victim that you're trying to help, whether it be during an investigation or something like that. You don't talk about your shit. First of all, who are you going to talk to? You're not going to talk to people you work with, right? You're not going to go outside. We had a guy, I don't know, did you guys have a mental health person for your age? We had a guy come in that nobody wanted to, he was an asshat anyway, but nobody wanted to fucking talk to him. And so he wasn't even approachable if you wanted to. Maybe, I guess, if you wanted to, but he was some guy that was just like, in case of emergency, talk to this guy, and nobody used him to my knowledge. And just that, what makes a good cop is the ability to manage emotions and to stifle them. I don't want to say manage, just kind of push them down. And any kind of emotion like that was deemed as a weakness. Now, it has changed significantly. I think in some cases it's gone a little bit too much to that side where it's all about emotion. Listen, this job is fucking tough. It's not meant for everybody. Sometimes you got to put your big boy pants on, right? Or big girl pants on. That's what you got to do sometimes. I think we can go a little bit too far and be like, okay, let's take a break to kind of hug it out. That's not what, in my opinion, that's not what I think is good for the whole thing. I think you need to have a good balance. Don't be an asshole about it. If somebody's really struggling, sure. And the other thing that we got, which I started seeing a lot, was a lot of people kind of like feigning, like I have self-diagnosing, like I have PTSD or I have depression, stuff like that, only because they feel sad for a day. there's no clinical diagnosis or anything like that, right? And I always find that kind of hurts everybody else when somebody kind of fakes the funk a little bit, right? Until I went to when I was starting the unit, I went to I'll throw his name, Mark Fury over at Boston ED, Boston Peer Support. He ran it for a long time, and I asked him because when I was starting the unit, I was like, I'm going to come into some obstacles, and then you'd be like, well, you're going to start a peer unit. People are going to take advantage of it. So I was like, hey, Mark, what do I say to the supervisors and the executive staff when they're like, people are going to take advantage of it? And he's like, of course they are. And I'm like, what? I said, I can't tell my bosses that I'm starting a unit that people are going to take advantage of. He goes, no. He goes, you don't understand. He goes, more people are pretending to be okay than will ever pretend to be hurt. And it kind of stuck with me. And I was like, and we had that. We had an individual who was on medical, working in the office, not wearing a uniform, not wearing like sweatpants and shit like that, which I don't give a shit. Do what you want to do. But every day I got to come in. I'm in uniform. I got to wear it. And this is when I was a supervisor. So I'm coming in. I was like, this is ridiculous. And so it was coming up on the time for this person that was going back to full duty, which meant they had to put on a uniform again, and they had to keep very specific hours because they were coming in whenever they wanted to, which, again, if you got it like that, cool. The day before this person was supposed to go back to fit for full duty, they tripped in the back parking lot and twisted their ankle. And I'm like, okay. Now take that situation, and then I have somebody that worked for me and that I worked with in K9. They took a low hit, shattered their ankle to the point where we were going to we're going to cut the suit off, the bike suit and everything. And and she was like, no, don't cut it off. It's the only suit we have. I'm not going to ruin it for everybody, So with a shattered ankle comes out every 5 seconds. She was like, when am I getting back to work? Probably one of the hardest working K9 officers I've ever seen. And she was a gangster officer and she worked narcotics too. So she's amazing, right? So here you have somebody who's significantly injured, career-ending injury, who's fighting to come back to work. So you have those two. And I would argue you have more people fighting to come back to work than you do, at least at that time, than you do people faking to kind of leave. I can't speak to what's going on right now as somebody in the department because I'm not in the department anymore, right? But I'm sure it's changed a little bit. So I think of it that way. So my goal when I was going through all this stuff was I want to make it so that we have a good balance. Do your job. It's going to be shitty. You don't have to be happy all the time. You don't have to be singing and dancing the whole every day that you come into work. If you're struggling with whatever it is, finances, money, relationship, whatever, let's figure that out. But get your shit together and let's get back to work. Here's what you need to do. As opposed to, all right, let's give them time to not do anything. I don't think that's not my thing. But I'm not going to punish somebody from telling me that they feel a certain way. When you let me ask you this, Doug, on the team, because you guys have seen enough pretty horrific shit, and you probably also dealt with guys on the team that had some personal shit going on that kind of bled into work and stuff like that. How about you back in the day to kind of, although I'd say smaller units have a tendency to kind of look out for their own, but it's still not to the same degree as like the general population of first responders. What was it like for you guys?
Oh, we literally had the same thing. We had a lot of guys. I knew this, and I tell this story. This is half the reason why I started Survive First, because when I came back to work after treatment, the very first morning after work, I looked around the squad room, and I noticed all these guys in the room with me and girls that were struggling as well, because I knew I was struggling over certain situations. And I was like, man, that guy was there with me at this point. And the very first person I looked at was with me in Louisiana, which is one of my most traumatic events, in my career. And, so I knew that I wasn't the only one struggling. And then you had the guys in the department. It's funny, you were talking about the shattered ankle. I remember, you know, as y'all know, I got run over by a truck. I mean, I don't listen to me. That just says it right there. I got run over by a Dodge Ram pickup truck and shattered me into a million pieces. Multiple surgeries, spinal cord injury, and I had vertebrae that were replaced with blocks. Pretty extensive. I came back to work probably a year later, somewhere within a year, you know. And when I got back to work, I went to my SWAT commander and I said, "Hey, man, where's so and so at?" And he looks at me and he goes, "He's still out with his bruised kneecap." He was out before I got ran over. So it was the same thing, you know. And I'm not punking this operator out because he's a gangster and I love him with all my heart and he's a squared away dude. But what I'm getting at is a lot of officers when they're struggling, instead of going, "Hey, I'm fucked up in my head,"
I got to
they
piss.
go that route because they, you know, "Oh, well, I got a bruised kneecap and the doctor said I can't work or I can't walk on it." I've never heard of that, you know, before, but his doctor did that.
Well, thank God when you got run over, you didn't bruise your kneecap.
No, I mean, the funny thing was, is I had 2 knee surgeries from that broken back. I had my right knee done twice in that period. I had the shoulder surgery, but you know, everybody's different. But I say all that to say that that officer was not coming back to work, not because of the injury, but because of the mental injury that he was going through, the crap marriage that he was experiencing, things like that. So a lot of officers out there and firefighters and dispatchers, everybody, we're christening cops, and we use the word police a lot, cops. But you know, that's the reason why I see that quite a bit in my view.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that uh, I think about, like personal stories wise, um, where we had to shut. I'll give you one example of where emotions were kind of high, but you had to regulate it. You had to regulate it. There was no. We're in the middle of a situation. We had an officer killed, and the suspect was still at large. Now I don't know if anybody's, and I've unfortunately had seen people in uniform, in every kind of uniform, you know, fire, EMS, military, police. There's something very odd about seeing like a cop in his uniform dead on the street. It's like, I mean, first of all, I can't count how many times I've seen somebody dead on the street. It's just, it is what it is, the job, right? But there's something very different about seeing that uniform laying there motionless. And we were sitting there, and at the time I was working criminal intelligence, which kind of liaising with all the different federal agencies and when this happens, everything stops and we start focusing on what we can do for assets to try to find out where this individual was, right? So we're working on all that stuff. We go to the scene, trying to set everything up to get this guy in, and an officer had started on the scene in uniform. Just was this officer? They were friends. Broke down crying, and I was offset of the scene, just like maybe 100 feet away from where this was going down, and I mean shaking, crying uncontrollably, almost like a kid, right? And one of the homicide detectives had come over, grabbed him, picked him up, and says, "Get your shit together, get the fuck off the scene, and then we'll come figure out what's going on. This is not the place." We still had a guy. First of all, we didn't know how many people were involved in killing this cop, right? So, are they still around? We don't need somebody to be a target. So they kind of moved that individual off to offset a little bit, right? Now, I remember thinking how horrible that was to kind of see that or experience that, and then thinking how bad it was for that individual. And I was like, but you got to do it. It's one of those things where there's a time and place. That wasn't the time and place to kind of break down. And we didn't need you being an additional casualty to what was going on. I remember doing that. There was another instance where there was a drive-by shooting, and there was a very young child killed in the drive-by. Young kid is killed. Scene's over. The child's body's still there. They had an officer in the front, an officer in the back, and then the medics eventually come down to pronounce the kid and do all this good stuff. The medic, or actually the two medics that were there, that were transporting one of the other folks that worked on the kid, and the two officers that were assigned to watching the doors to hold the scene that could clearly see this kid, all had kids the same age. And it was, I remember feeling like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. So want to kind of, but I in those moments you see, yeah, we're first responders. We have a job to do. But we're also human. And years later, there was a documentary called Restrepo. I think it was Restrepo or Korngal, where a Marine gets killed in combat, and their staff sergeant comes up, gathers everybody around, and says, "Hey, listen, take this time, grieve, cry, get mad, yell, do what you got to do, then get the fuck back to work." So he took that pause. But again, you're in the middle of a combat zone. You can't go time out to the bad guys, to the Taliban, and be like, "Hey, time out. We lost somebody. We need to gather ourselves." But he knew that you needed that moment because they're kids, right? We're pretty young when this stuff's kind of going down. So get your shit together. Do what you got to do. Cry, be upset, mourn, however it is you want to do it. But we got a job to do, and we got to be back on set now, right? So I think those are the times where I see the contrast between we have this facade of like, hey, we're doing what we need to do, and then what it really looks like, or rolling up to a significantly bad scene with involving children. And for me, the big thing was if it involved children or older adults that were either taken advantage of or kids that were exploited and stuff, or any of that. I wish I could say that the middle part really concerned me, but it really didn't. Some 30-year-old or 25-year-old gangbanger who gets killed, selling dope or trying to rob somebody. I feel for the family having to deal with that, but it doesn't hit me as much as dealing with a child who's innocent or an older individual who doesn't have the capacity to kind of fend for themselves. And that's tough. Did you see anything while you were working, Doug?
Oh my God, man. I heard you say child when I came back in, and I wanted to say the most horrific thing that I experienced in my career was a child. I obviously I was involved in a lot of shootings and shit like that, and homicides and gang warfare, all that stuff. And you almost kind of understand that that's part of the game. That's part of cops and robbers. Bad guys kill bad guys, all that type of stuff. But when it's a baby child, there's this innocence that, man, I'm getting horrible feedback, Chris.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, it's like that split screen. I'm hearing myself, like the other screen is overtaking it. So bear with me. It's kind of hard to talk like this, but anyway, I was saying, coming across the child, the small child. I'd only been a cop. My first child I'd only been a cop a few months, and it was Christmas Eve. And I tell the story when I'm on stage. You've heard it a million times, Chris, man. I just wasn't prepared to roll up and see a child in that capacity. And then I was telling the story yesterday. My first day, I was an acting sergeant. And it was funny. It was the day, so typical for my career. The day I came back to work from my broken back, I was like, they're going to fire me today. because they didn't want me to come back to work because they didn't want a 40-year-old guy with a broken back out on the streets, and that whole dilemma. And so anyway, that morning I'm only at work, like a few minutes, and the radio comes on and they call me to the station, the lieutenant. And doesn't, it's like, hey, come in my office, so I'm like, okay, here it comes. So I go into the office, there's all this command staff, the chief, and I go, hey guys, do I need an attorney? Because it looked like I was about to get indicted and fired. And they said, no, sit down, we want to talk to you. And they go, hey, we're promoting you. And I went, fuck. I'm like, what did everybody else do wrong? Because if you're at me on the list, a lot of dudes got passed up and mad.
Hey, Doug, real quick. Shut your camera off and turn it back on again.
Shut my camera?
Yeah, and turn it back on. No, you're still frozen. That's all right. Go ahead.
So, am I frozen?
Yeah, that's all right.
Earlier. So anyway, I go out. I mean, it's first call of the morning, and it's a suspicious incident. Get on scene, and it's a brand new baby who's deceased, and there's blood splatter all across the wall. And where the guy had taken the baby by the ankles and hit it against the wall. Let's just leave it at that. And that was my first experience in that. I always got it broken off in my ass on the first day. First day as a cop, got it broken off in the first day. Those two calls right there, I can remember the smells of the environment. I remember the smell of the house. I remember the vivid pictures. And so, yeah, they impact you in a way that for me, it was I didn't understand how this happened to a child or a small baby. I understood the rest of it. And, you were saying earlier, when I was in the police academy, when I came into the job, I went through when I was in the police academy, they brought a cop in exactly like yours. He was from the local police department, and he came in and said, tell us the story of his shooting. And it was to prepare us. And when there was the same thing, a guy charged him in domestic violence with a knife, and he zippered him. And as he's telling the story, he said it happened so quick that the first bullet went in the ground. His second bullet went in the shin. The third bullet went in the thigh. As he came up, because his body wasn't reacting to it. That is what I took from that story, because I was so prepared combat-wise that's what I took from that story. I didn't take a mental health version of it. I didn't prepare myself for being in. I took, okay, I need to prepare myself in my mind so that I make sure that I'm on target quickly and those things. And then my second indoctrination into the combat world, because I knew that the department I was going to was a combat zone. I knew the city of Cocoa was a violent, shooting every day, gang banging every day type of environment. And the first person I met was Dave Grossman, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. Everybody knows. And Dave says to me, man, we're having this conversation, and he says, hey, bro, kill them all and let God sort them out. And he's like, Ranger, hoorah. Dave, right? That's how he was in the 90s. He wasn't preaching the word of God like he is now, like he was back then. So that was the indoctrination into what I was getting ready to experience. And so, yeah, there was no mental component to the picture. It was prepare yourself for combat, just like you. And so I didn't have those tools coming into the game. They might tell you in the police academy, oh, you're gonna see dead people and dead children. And when you're in the police academy, you got two things on your mind. I'm gonna get a paycheck. Maybe three. I'm gonna get a badge, and I'm gonna get a gun. and I'm going run and gun. And when you're in the academy, you're not preparing yourself, and they're not telling you what those components were there. And if you asked when I went and you went to the academy, they would have berated you at a level that would not be accepted in any culture in this day and age. They would have berated you know. And so, the children, I even in the industry you're in honor it now, that always seems to be the number one catalyst. Most gunslingers like us will tell people, yeah, that was pretty traumatic and it sucked. But that's not my story. That wasn't my problem. Same for Raul. He'll tell you shooting that dude at Pulse, that's not his story. It's the totality of circumstances and the career stuff. And, we've got to do a better job of preparing people, because I get that question. How do we fix this mental health game? Because it's not working. We have more tools now, but it hasn't fixed the problem. Which brings me to this. You'll get a kick at this. And I'm not being derogatory in any way. I was having a conversation with a police chief just recently. I just came from a conference. And he said to me, he goes, we're having such problems in our department with alcoholism and family life and depression and all the things that we talk about. And he said, but every time I hire a cop, I give them Dr. Gil Martin's book.
Emotional Survival.
Amazing book. An amazing book, amazing guy, probably one of the greatest speakers I've seen. And he said that to me, and I go, Chief, that book is not for a brand new officer. That book needs to go to the 10-year officer. And I go, and please hear me out when I say this. I go, Dr. Gil Martin wrote that book over 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah. I go, clearly it ain't fucking working. Because the suicide numbers are through the roof. Yeah. And you can't look by what one organization says for suicides. We've proven that number is grossly incorrect. Yeah. And so, the numbers are still high, so that's not working. We need to do something more. Maybe not so much different, because Gil Martin's book is great. Maybe not different, but maybe more.
Yeah. Yeah. His book is phenomenal. I think what a lot of us are initially, because when I first started all these programs and stuff, I was like, this job really messes us up. And to be fair, this job doesn't help a lot. But the majority of us coming into this job are dealing with unresolved issues from our childhood or from growing up or during our developmental stages where, this is where we're at. And I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying that's part of the whole big picture, the totality of it, like you were saying earlier. And I say this all the time. I have yet to meet a first responder or veteran that has one problem. There's not like this job is bad. It was a tough call. It's a tough call. I'm going home. I'm not having a good time, or I'm not having a really productive relationship with family, friends, isolation. How I deal with it. The cost of going through this without kind of having a mechanism to handle it or to process all the traumas that we experience and stuff like that, winds up leading to that gallows humor, that macabre sense of humor that I'd rather laugh than cry at a situation, or becoming overly aggressive. And I mean, not so much, it doesn't have to be physically, but it could be physically, it could be emotionally, psychologically, just with the people you care about, just kind of going back and forth, like having a short fuse when you get home, or having a short fuse when you're interacting with somebody in the public, or you're working on something by yourself and it doesn't go right, and you start yelling and screaming when it's really not anything super great. So we kind of disconnect. So the way we look at it at times is, if every time I interact with somebody, I'm getting a negative response, the one thing that we, in our brains, we think that'll stop that is, I'm going to stop interacting. So you see people isolating or backing off from doing work, or hesitant to go on calls, or to do certain things. And I'm not saying negligent, just being a little bit further removed because you're constantly getting hurt. And the other thing is, because of what we see and what we do, and the our understanding of our culture, is that there's really not anybody that we can talk to that can understand, which is not wholly true, right? So we don't tell our spouses or our family, what we've actually been seeing. I mean, they want to hear the funny stories of the tactical stuff and all that good stuff and all the technology and stuff like that. They want to hear that. But what happens is we become so retreated into our culture that we start disengaging with people outside of what we do, which is a huge mistake. I have a ton of amazing friends that have no idea what it is to be a cop or to be a veteran or to do anything like that. They're working IT stuff. They're working, financial things. They're working all sorts of stuff. So when we lose, if this is all we've known, all we've been doing, it becomes our identity, and then stepping away from it somehow kind of steals our identity from us. So there's what we think we are, how we're not interacting with people, or how we interact with people. There's like a bunch of different things. And that's without even touching the financial aspect of this. Something I joked about, I think last time I joked about something like, I got a tax refund for like $400. It was like $431.50. And then I had either something breaks, or I had a vet bill. Yeah, it was a vet bill that was like $400.34 or something like that. It was always kind of struggling for like the money, or I'm working part-time. So now I'm taking myself away from the family. I'm overworking myself. The best thing to do would be kind of step away, to take a break or a respite from all this work and spend time for yourself and do stuff that you like with your family. But then that financial stuff comes in. You're like, well, if I work an extra 20 hours or 30 or 40 hours, I'll have money for this. And then we wind up trying to, save away for that. Something else happens. And by the way, we're not the greatest people to live with while this whole thing is going on. So when we start losing control, that's what happens. It starts spilling over emotionally and physically, and our health declines, and our relationships are kind of take a hit, and our work productivity goes down, or we start getting in trouble at work. Or so what do you do? Well, the one thing I know to do when I get done with work, or I have 4 seconds, I'm gonna have a cocktail. I'm gonna drink. And even better, I'm going to drink with my friends. I'm going to drink with the other folks that are doing it. It's funny because we're all in the same place, right? We're not technically all in the same place at the same time, but we're in a very familiar surrounding, and we're all like, it's normal. The biggest example of that is Police Week in DC, which is, for me, was great because I was in the pipe band. So I'd play for the Emerald Society Parade at the beginning of it. And then it was just drinking. And then you get to meet the widows or the surviving partners, or the people that are either their names are being read to be put on the wall, or their names have just been put on the wall. So you're dealing with a lot of people that are dealing with grief, that are dealing with a shared trauma. You're dealing with organizations. Like if a cop gets killed in the line of duty, that organization, a good portion of them go for the name to be read. And again, depending on the time, your name gets read to be put on the National Law Enforcement Memorial Wall. Or you come back the following year where your name is actually on the wall already. So there's also drinking, which again, it's been a major downfall. I mean, I work, and we both work in a place where we help folks that have gone to that point where it's taken over their life. And I've never to this day dealt with anybody who just has a drinking issue. I haven't. it's always drinking and some kind of mental health kind of component. So it's like co-occurring kind of thing. And you see it, we see the spectrum. We see people that just become so emotional that they can't function, or you see people becoming so stoic or so blunted that there's no emotion, there's no feeling there. They kind of lost the light. And I say that because that's what my wife said. She said, Chris, the most devastating thing and the saddest thing I've ever saw was you pretending, this post-shooting, pretending to be happy or pretending to like put a face on. And I didn't think I thought I did a great job pretending, but let's see. We got a question. One of the things I saw was doing earlier on was just trading one thing for another, thinking I was doing better, but I was only jamming different stuff in the place of the other. Yeah. You know what? I see that a lot with.
Right there. That's also the will to survive. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we trade again. We 100%. This is really bad. So let me do something that's not really bad, and it's just as bad eventually, or it kind of takes over. Or I've seen folks become very successful in getting sober, stop using medications or anything like that, and they go 1,000 miles an hour into physical fitness. There was a guy that I worked with. He would do 1,000 pull-ups a day. That was his routine. And we joked because he never did like leg day. So he was this huge guy with little toothpick legs. So his big thing was physical. Let me do all the physical stuff. They went on a call, slipped on a handicap ramp, and he broke his leg. Now he can't do the physical stuff. So now what does he do? So that's the thing. We don't divvy up stuff like, all right, if I'm hurt physically, what can I do to kind of help myself? That can kind of, what's the term we use? It's like you have a table and you have your emotion, the psychological side, the behavior or the wellness or the physical side, spiritual, like what these four things that you use to kind of maintain yourself. Sorry, my dog's kicking this bit.
Chris, I want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
You made a comment earlier about only having one problem, right? Whether it's physical, you know, you're sitting there talking about multiple problems. Raul, yesterday when we were teaching a class, Raul always talks about, you know, our partner Chris, our brother Chris says he has yet to meet a cop with one problem. He goes, is there anybody in here that just has one problem? And this captain from the sheriff's department, he raises his hand. He goes, I only have one problem. He goes, really? He goes, what is it? He goes, my job. That's just what he said. I just figured when he did, I laughed. I was like, man, I wish Prince would have heard that. That's the first time I've heard anybody
Well, he's a unicorn. You should have taken this picture.
Yeah. And Raul called him the unicorn, actually, because he's so used to saying it. But I wanted to add something to this conversation. Yeah. This is something that's come up quite a few times lately. And I had an amazing conversation with the sheriff yesterday. And he was telling me, and so let me step back. Karen used to always call me Serious Doug. Mm-hmm. She goes, why don't you ever laugh? Why don't you ever smile? And I go, I laugh inside and I smile inside. And that was just it, because I really didn't have an answer, because I was always serious. Over time, now we're talking 10 years ago, because she used to call me RoboCop, because I looked like I didn't look like a regular cop. I looked like I was coming home from Big Root. And, so we're talking a long time ago. Let's fast forward. I'm having this conversation with this sheriff, and he said, I struggle. I'd ask him, how you doing, brother? And he's like, man, thanks for asking. He goes, nobody ever asked me how I'm doing, right? Think about it. The guy's a big mecca of a sheriff. And so anyway, he says, one of the things I'm struggling with is my mother passed away a while back, and I didn't cry. And it bothers me every day. I'm starting to cry now that in it. And he says, I struggled with that. And then it hit me, and we had this conversation. I go, this is what I remember. When I was an operator and when I was running a SWAT team and I was a dope guy, it didn't matter, but especially when I was in the operator industry. When we were on scene, and you know this, you being a sergeant and a canine guy, there was never high fives. There was never pats on the ass. There was never shaking hands, busting knuckles, laughing. It was unacceptable. It was unprofessional, right? We know that in our career. I never put the two and two together. Now, spend 20 years, 25 years, whatever your number is, 20 for me. You spend 20 years being serious, not laughing, because it's unprofessional. No matter what the scene is, you cannot be seen laughing, carrying on, kibitzing, whatever the term is. And then all of a sudden, people are like, why don't you ever laugh? Why don't you ever smile? Where did the emotions go? And this is what I saw in this particular share. I was like, this dude has been on national TV for a national disaster. Let's leave it at that. And he's had to play in that role for a really long time, from his top days all the way now until his sheriff days. And so now all of a sudden, people are asking me, why don't you show any emotion? Mm-hmm. And so that is part of that era of toughness, being taught toughness. Indirectly, you're taught toughness, but that is one of the things that I've realized, man, no wonder why I don't laugh. No wonder why I struggled after years with seeing joy and laughing and carrying on and seeing the bright, because your whole career you're told to shut that down. There's no room for high fives out here. That's unprofessional. These people are in tragedy. Even if you catch the worst bad guy, a murder, rapist, terrorist, you're not slapping high fives once you come out of the house with that dude. Unprofessional. That was on news. Look, they're celebrating this, and you know how people like to take
one 4-second video of you on the news. Cops celebrate killing. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, there's a trooper going through right now from a college football game. Have you seen the video?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I told Karen, I said, no. I know that situation. I know what's going on there. That's a 4-second clip of a police officer. Now, if I'm walking down a hallway and 4 dudes have me blocked in and they're about to bust into me and I have a gun on me and a taser on me, I'm putting my arms out to protect those things, and you're not going to hit me. And if you hit me and you say something smart, I'm going to tell you to beat it, like that cop did. Get it, what he's saying, get on the field, get out of here.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's looking at, did you really, just because you scored a touchdown in a college football game, did you really need to run in the tunnel that far? You ain't running that fast, Cheetah. You could have started, And so, that dude has a job to protect safety, and you get it, right? I mean, we could dissect this for hours, but that's what happens. Now, this guy has to play a serious role every day, do all that stuff, can't show emotion. And then if you do, people turn it around and shove it up your ass like they've done this trooper. So those are important factors to keep in mind.
So the big question is, and so one of the things that we've talked about this, and with some of the folks that we work in the same circles, is that there's a lot of places that'll put out information on how bad this is and this sucks and this and really not go into, well, what do you do? So there's a couple different things. There's nowadays we're educating our young first responders and veterans on how to sustain a career in this kind of environment. And it's interesting, like, because I just saw I mentioned it last time, but I saw the interview with one of the DevGru operators that was on the Bin Laden raid, and a bunch of the team guys that they've had on different podcasts and stuff like that talk about how nobody taught them or discussed or even there was a venue for how to help them manage or navigate what it looks like, especially in that community. So I think nowadays they're getting a little bit better. I'm not saying they're where they should be, but they're getting a little bit better than they were, right? Um, the big thing for me is there's still this understanding that if you reach out for help, whatever that looks like, that it's somewhat of a sign of weakness. So for all these high speed jobs that we do, all the disciplines, whether it be first responder discipline or military discipline, right? We all want to be courageous. I think very few of us don't want to be perceived as courageous. We do. We want to be like, when the bad shit happens, I want to be able to do it and be the person that people look to for help. The problem is we don't want to be vulnerable by reaching out for help, whatever that looks like, whether it be treatment, whether it be outpatient, whether it be, seeing a clinician, which if I think it should be mandatory that at least a couple times every couple years that, and depending on where, like if you're in sex crimes or violent crimes, you should be talking to somebody at least once a year while you're in there. I would say more, but once a year, just to unload some of the stuff. So I was going through one of my favorite speakers is Brene Brown, and she said something that just absolutely stuck with me. And she said, we want to be courageous, right? But she goes, and we don't want to be vulnerable. It is impossible to be courageous without being vulnerable. And I'm thinking, and when anytime somebody says that, like, it's impossible or this will never, or that, I'm in my head, I'm going, all right, I can think of a situation, and I couldn't. Like, let's say if the gunshots start going off, it takes courage to go run in there, or towards the gunfire, or towards a fire, or towards or working a scene, or just helping somebody in the midst of all this, right? But in being courageous, you're opening yourself up to be vulnerable, whether it be shot, killed, hurt, stabbed, whatever. So I'm thinking, I'm like, wow, that is such. So maybe we could start changing it. So the idea is just changing what this looks like to get help. Asking for help, I would argue, takes more courage than anything else in this world. It's the hardest thing to do. And it's tough because it's almost like we're admitting defeat, which we're not. Nobody on this planet can do things by themselves all the time forever. Just can't. You need help. We all need help sometimes, and there is nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. And it's kind of brings me back to something that we were talking about. I know we were discussing it. Was somebody had mentioned, like, marriage is a 50-50 split. And then I remember watching, I don't know if it was Brene Brown or Rachel Remen or one of the folks that speaks on this. She goes, it's not 50-50. Sometimes it's 80-20. Sometimes it's 40-60. Sometimes it's 99-1, right? It changes. We don't need the same amount of help all the time, every time. Sometimes we're the helping person. Sometimes we're the person that needs the help. And that shifts, that changes all over the place. So also relearning, because I say this all the time. There was a guy that, and again, on the last show, there was a guy that was deployed for like 400 days in a combat area, comes back. Now he's got to unlearn all the conditioning that he's been through. So, but that, if you do a career long enough, your body gets accustomed to it physiologically, psychologically. That we have our call, the call and response. Like, if this happens, then we do this. The smells is a big thing. Smells can bring us back to a good time, bad time, and trauma does not. And your brain could give a shit about how long ago something bad happened or something good happened. It's gonna hold on to that, right? So learning how to regulate that, or learning how to understand it and then treat it, or get help for it. And so again, knowing what help there is important. So, like, especially with what we do, we have different resources for folks. I was just putting together something for an agency. The one I shared with you on the email, Doug. It was if this, then this. So if you start seeing changes in behavior, if you start seeing this, what's some of the solutions? Is there an EAP? Is there somebody that he or she can talk to? Is there a component that we're taking care of our men and women that do the jobs? What are we doing for the family? Are we providing any resources for the family? Because guess who the first people to see something going sideways? It's husband, wife, kids, mom, dad, cousins, stuff like that. What resources are available for them to help themselves deal with us? Because I was no picnic, although I think I am, but I was no picnic at all. And I think if we brought Karen on for 4 seconds, she'd tell you how much of an awesome picnic you were to deal with, right, from time to time, right? It's just one of these things. So for me, I think, and kind of looking at some of our notes, how do we redefine toughness? Toughness incorporates being vulnerable. That's just what it does. You have to be vulnerable. And being vulnerable just means that you have to be okay with somebody thinking that, this guy can't handle it. I don't give a shit. And I say this all the time. There's a handful of things that I fall back on. The day I stopped giving a shit about what other people thought of me, if I was reaching out for help, or if I went into treatment or whatever it is, was the day a weight was just lifted off of me. Because the one thing stopping me from getting help a lot of times or talking to somebody was, man, they're going to think I'm a loser, or they're going to think I'm weak, or they're not going to trust me, or they're not going to. I got news for you. People aren't going to trust you. They're going to like you. They are going to trust you. You don't have control over that. All you have control over is how you respond to it. So I think redefining what that looks like without going overboard, and I know that's a tough part of it, because I got to tell you, Doug, and I know me, you, and Raul are on the same page on this. I think I'm as successful in surviving because it was rough.
Yeah.
Because we had it like that. There is no quit. And I've said this a million times. I may lose the fight, but I guarantee you that other motherfucker is going to know he was in a fight. I'm not quitting. It's just one of those things. And so, what are you doing this for? So, get healthy for you, first and foremost. If I hear a lot of folks saying, Doug, you hear it too, and I know Raul does, and we all do. I want to get healthy for my husband, for my wife, for my kids. That doesn't work. Get healthy for you, and that other shit will fall in place. That other stuff falls in. Trust me, it does. And by the way, falling in place doesn't mean everything's going to be magically happy all over again, right? It just means you have another stage that you got to work on. Just keep on keeping on. Keep on keeping on. It's not anything as a quick fix, but there are resources available. For me, I think we would benefit from helping people if they had a mechanism to talk to somebody, and they're talking to people, because our friends that are clinicians they're inundated. Like, they're getting more people talking to them, which is great. So I think that's working out. So talking to somebody, having a support system. This job is temporary, as cool and as awesome as it is, but it will be over, and that doesn't mean that your life is over. You can do some other shit after this. Doug, myself, and Raul are living proof that the being in the job or leaving the job does not mean that your life ends and everything's all done with, right? Find your purpose, whatever that is. I know guys that left the job, became HVAC guys. Those guys are making triple the money of what they made. They made more money in the first 5 years that they started working HVAC stuff than they did their whole career in the police department.
Yeah.
It's insane. But I hope we got to that. I hope we got to that one question. We kind of answered that. That we do tend to replace things with other vices or other, and again, something in excess is not necessarily always as good, even though it's better.
What I say a couple shows ago, a little bit of something won't kill you, but a lot will.
Yeah.
And sometimes, Chris and I both have traded off one bad thing for something that we thought was better. May not be the greatest thing. We both quit drinking years ago, and had to replace that bad thing with something just to help get past it. So sometimes that's not a bad thing. And you're right, Chris. I've had to learn to say to be grateful for the things that I have and to be grateful. It's really difficult when you leave the job. And it's really difficult. Like every year I go to SWAT Roundup with Raul. And yeah, I'm a SWAT guy. Yeah, you didn't know about it. I was a SWAT guy when I started. I was a SWAT guy when I ended. And that's the only reason I became a cop. And I go every year to cheer the guys on and to be part of the brotherhood. And I love being around operators, but it's really difficult. And I really get, and when I see new guys on my team that don't know me, oh my God, the fuck you don't know me, man. Like, right?
Yeah.
And, it's an ego thing, whatever, but I find myself thanking God that I was able to be part of something great in my life. Be grateful for that now that I've transitioned over to the other side and be grateful. And then I also have to tell myself, you focus on the things that I can't control.
Yeah.
And some things you can't control. Some things happen to you in life. They don't happen to your life. They just happen during your life. And that's what I've had to tell myself, and just to accept them and then to move on and just to focus. Because it's there, anybody who sits here and tell you life's going to be a piece of cake once you get help, they're full of shit. It's just, I always adequate to cancer. I saw Karen go through it. And I always say, listen, man, if you get cancer, you wake up with cancer one day, you're going to go to the doctor. You're going to treat it with everything you have in your soul. And then you're going to beat it, God willing. And then you're going to have to spend the rest of your life paying attention to it and aftercaring it and making healthy choices, healthy changes, eating, all those things. And we're really good at doing that. And we're really good about rallying around the people that come down with cancer.
Yeah.
I was told by a doctor that cancer is no different than a mental injury or mental health. I didn't ask. I woke up one day and my fucking world was upside down. I thought I had gook in my eyes, but the whole fucking world had been flipped over on me in one night. And that was it. And I had to deal with it. And so sometimes you have to accept the fact that, okay, I woke up with this. Now I've got to do all these things the rest of my life to deal with it. It's not, and that's okay. And you can't control them. So just, sometimes accepting it is half the battle as well. And that's what I've had to learn to do. And that would be the message to people. In some way, hopefully that can help.
Yeah. 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 Again, just to reiterate that, and then we'll sign off here is we all have the goal. The goal when you're first doing the job is to do the job and then eventually kind of retire and stuff like that. But don't get so distracted with the goal that you're missing the awesomeness that is the present of it. Because I got to tell you, there's some times that I look back and I'm like, I'd give anything to be in that. I would give anything to be in the briefing right before we're getting ready to kick somebody's door in, and fucking take everybody to jail and take guns and dope and everything off the street. Or the ride. I would give anything to be on the back of that raid van or in that canine truck, getting ready to search a house or getting ready to deploy on a hostage taker or something. But I don't think I realized how much fun I was having in the moment because I was so focused on everything else. So just like anything else, just be present. We talked about it last show. Be present. And whether you win or lose at whatever fight you're dealing with, continue to fight. Just continue to fight. And how do you do that? With help. Friends, family, support group. And I'll just put it to this way because we're up on time, but and real quick, Raul is taking care of some other stuff, so he's not just avoiding you. So big shout out to Raul. He'll be on. We are going to be recording, I think, a show, right, Doug? We're going to be recording a show for next week because for the holidays and stuff like that. So with that, got Guys, thank you so much for listening. As always, if you or somebody you know is struggling or needs some help, you don't know what to do, who to call, don't ever hesitate to give us a shout, especially during the holiday seasons. We're here for you guys and your family. So God bless. Have a good one, and stay safe. Thanks for listening, guys.
Deals with it. They're going to look. Can't deal with it. Afraid. Practice for that. On and but I did it talking of the devil unroyal. Do it not French you can believe. Light it. I say, believe. Go race with no Microsoft knife and a